What's up, guys? Jimmo here with RefinishNetwork.com. Today we're going to be talking about using body fillers, how to use them, how to pick them, and everything in between. So depending on what you're doing, you're going to likely find yourself wanting to pick from one of these three categories of fiberglass, which can be long or short hair, your regular body fill, and putty or finishing glaze. So first off, we're looking at the fiberglass here. Now it comes in both a long and short-haired version. The long hair is going to give you a bit more strength, and you can build it a bit thicker than you can with the short-haired stuff. I tend not to see too much of it in collision. You'd probably use more of the long-haired stuff in some sort of a custom work. But the benefits of fiberglass is it uses glass fibers as the bulking agent to give it the strength. It's the same, all the fillers share the same sort of resin, which is a polyester resin for the most part. There are a few specialty fillers out there that use epoxy resins, but for the most part you're thinking of a polyester based filler when you're working with any body filler. And another benefit of the fiberglass, it's waterproof, so in collision it's usually used on panel replacement jobs. You might use it anywhere there's metal that's been welded. You'd probably use that over top of it before moving on to another filler. And the trade-off though with this is it sands harder, so it's more difficult to sand than the regular body filler or a finishing putty. So looking at our regular body fillers, it uses talc as the bulking agent, which makes it a lot easier to sand over fiberglass. It's used on large dent repairs, and it's made to sand, I guess, as easy as possible, but depending on the brand of filler that you use, you might find that one sands a bit easier than the other one, so you kind of have to find that on your own, but you'll get different opinions depending who you ask on which the best filler is out there to use. So lastly, we have our putty or finishing glaze, and it is used over small dents. It's often used as a final coat over maybe fiberglass or just a regular filler. It would fill pinholes, heavier scratches, little craters that you might have got with the heavier fillers. They don't go on quite as well. So this is basically just a thinned out version of the regular body fill. It's made to go on very evenly and thin, and it's made to sand very easy, so it's often the choice as the last filler before you move on to the next step. So all of these fillers need to be activated before you can use them, so they come with a cream hardener. You can see that I'm pouring in right now, and I'm mixing it on the scale. I believe it's at 3%. You'll have to check your TDS sheets, which I'm going to be going over in a sec. They will give you all the information you need to know to get these products ready to go on. So TDS sheets, or technical data sheets, you'll probably hear me talking a lot about these over the next few videos right up to the end. They become increasingly more important when you get into the paint section, but they definitely have their place for fillers and whatnot. So a TDS sheet, you can find them on the manufacturer's website, and it will provide you with all the information you need to know about the product, including but not limited to the mixing ratio, compatible surfaces, and the proper surface preparation before applying the product. So following the Sunfire dent repair that we were talking about earlier, I am going to be using a finishing putty on this job to fix that dent. So I'm going to remove the paint using the sander. I got some 80 grit paper on it. So I'm going to remove the paint around the dent and maybe about an inch beyond there as well. So if it were a larger dent like this one here, you can see I'm using a larger sander for starters. You could use a grinder as well, but you'd want to check your technical data sheet, and it would give you the information that you need depending on the filler that you've chosen. So a few things to keep in mind when you're mixing the filler. You want to avoid introducing any air into the mixture because that can create air pockets in the product, and it'll show up as pinholes when you're finished sanding, and it'll require more filler to fill the pinholes. So you'll be chasing your tail if you don't get the mixing down right. So some things to keep in mind is what you're mixing on. You want to either use a piece of metal or a mixing board would be ideal. You want to avoid using any porous products like cardboard that can suck up air, and that can also cardboard usually has a waterproofing agent like a wax that can dissolve in the filler if you mix on top of that, and then it's going to contaminate it, and God only knows what could happen. So avoid using cardboard. That's a big one. So what you want to try and do when you're mixing it on the board as well is be mixing in kind of a downwards direction, so you're squeezing out any air as you're mixing, and mix it all so it's one solid color before you put it on. And ideally you want to try and use two different spreaders, one for mixing and one for applying if you can. So this is obviously a different batch of filler I'm putting on here. When you're putting it on, you want to put it on in a few gradual coats rather than just to blob it on in one shot. And one other thing I wanted to mention about mixing fillers is do not mix your hardener based on the temperature. You probably hear a lot of that, especially I've seen quite a few videos on YouTube that suggest that if it's hotter, then you use less hardener. If it's colder, you use more. That is not the case. Do not do that. Mix it according to your technical data sheet. So once your filler hardens, it usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes. You'll want to begin block sanding, and you'll be using a coarser grit and gradually moving up, and ideally finishing in probably at least 180. But I usually start cutting with about an 80 grit paper. I might go a bit coarser if it's a large dent, but typically 80 is where I would try and start. But some tips to keep in mind is maybe use a block size that matches the repair. So a small dent, you can use a small one, but if you have a bigger dent, use a bigger block. And sand multi-directionally, so come at it, take 2 or 3 strokes upward, downward, sideways, diagonal. Keep mixing it up. Don't just keep going at it one way. And don't press down too hard. I mean, you got to apply some pressure to it, but don't be just reefing on her and giving it hell. So keep that in mind when you're sanding. So one thing that can be very beneficial, especially to somebody starting out, is using a guide coat on your filler. And a guide coat is basically just a visual aid that's going to be applied over top of your product, and you want pretty well anything that's contrasting in color. Now 3M makes a nice graphite powder that I often use, but you can use a spray can of any different color that's going to just contrast to what you're seeing. And basically how it works is as you're sanding, wherever the guide coat remains, it's going to tell you that area is low and it needs more leveling, and anywhere that the guide coat's been sanding off, it's going to tell you that the area is either high or it's starting to level off. So once your guide coat's removed, then your dent should be straight. So here is a guide coat in action. That's the 3M graphite powder, and you might notice as well that the filler's been applied over top of the sanded paint rather than just to the bare metal. It's not the best practice to do in the world, so what you should be doing is taking it down to the metal. So I guess just kind of do as I say, not as I do on this one. Okay, so once your filler's been leveled off, before moving on, you want to check for pinholes. So get up real close, see if you can see any little minor craters. And if you see anything like that, you will need to apply a bit more filler, just a nice tight skim of a finishing filler to fill anything before you move on to the next step. So if at any point you need to apply more filler, you can do that as many times as you like. It took me, a dent like that, maybe starting out, could have taken me 5 skims to do. So, you know, if it's not going right for you, you know, it takes practice. Just stick with it and, you know, apply more if you need to. And don't leave any coarse scratches in it. You can also use guide coat right before you finish sanding. You'll probably want to switch to a 180, and that'll help you verify that you've removed any coarser scratches out of the filler, because they can sink down the road. And when you're done painting, you'll end up seeing them maybe a few weeks as the products start to cure. Okay, so I guess that's it for this one. If you have any questions, you can just leave them in the comments below, and I will try my best to get around to answering them for you. You can also post them on the website, and there is a ton of qualified guys there that I'm sure are more than happy to help you out. So again, that's refinishnetwork.com. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.